In preparation for this event, I have thought long and hard about how far we've come. You see, as a young woman growing up in Haiti, yes, the same country that's been in the news, I did not really capture the significance of civil rights until I permanently moved to the States and learned that not too long ago, laws of this land daily sanctioned discrimination and unfair treatment based on one's skin color. For instance, in Louisiana, any person who shall rent any part of any such building to a Negro person or a Negro family when such building is already in whole or in part in occupancy by a white person or a white family shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. In Texas, the County Board of Education shall provide schools of two kinds, those for white children and those for colored children. In Georgia, all persons licensed to conduct a restaurant shall serve either white people exclusively or colored people exclusively, and shall not serve the two races within the same room or under the same license. Even in death, the law stipulated that the officer in charge shall not bury or allow to be buried any colored persons upon ground set apart or used for the burial of white persons. Every 4 days, lynchings were taking place. But boy, have we come a long way. I rejoice that I, or people who look like me, no longer need to watch out for signs that says colored only or whites only. In 1972, a black woman like me paved the way for Barack Obama to be president in 2008 and 2012. No National Guards protect our students of color on campus. They are safe and at home here. I am safe and at home here. Nevertheless, I'm concerned with our future and in us becoming apathetic citizens. I'm concerned that another form of segregation is becoming the law of the land, where we have erected invisible walls with only like-minded people, avoiding any discussions or situations that might make us uncomfortable. I'm concerned that a lack of engagement with the world is forcing us to adopt a not my problem attitude. I'm concerned because it's easier that we might be too eager to justify the inexcusable, to accept the unacceptable, and in so doing, putting our integrity and moral compass in peril. Let me remind you, if Dr. King was so PC, we wouldn't be here to commemorate his legacy. You see, Dr. King took positions. He spoke against the Vietnam War, which was a hot button in his day. He denounced racial injustice. He stood against various forms of institutionalized oppression. He did so through his conscience. His conscience guided him, motivated him to stay the course. My plea to you today as we move onward is to not let your conscience go dormant. Dr. King said it better. There comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must take it because conscience tells him it is right. What is your position? Open your eyes. Perk up your ears. Speak up. Silence is the voice of complicity. Take a position and let your conscience lead you to do the right thing. Our future depends on it. Thank you.
In 1953, from July to September of that year, services from Ebenezer Baptist Church were broadcast over radio. and many of Dr. King's prayers were recorded as he spoke them. So as our invocation this morning, I have chosen to use one of Dr. King's prayers instead of my prayer as a way of calling us to the center. Many of these prayers function as times of confession and repentance. So listen to this prayer from Dr. Martin Luther King from 1953. Let us be in an attitude of prayer. Most gracious and all-wise God, before whose face the generations rise and fall, thou in whom we live and move and have our being, we thank thee for all of thy good and gracious gifts, for life and for health, for food and for raiment, for the beauties of nature and the love of human nature. We come before thee painfully aware of our inadequacies and shortcomings. We realize that we stand surrounded with the mountains of love, and we deliberately dwell in the valley of hate. We stand amid the forces of truth and deliberately lie. We are forever offered the high road, and yet we choose to travel the low road. For these sins, O God, forgive. Break the spell of that which blinds our minds. Purify our hearts that we may see thee. O God, in these turbulent days, when fear and doubt are mounting high, give us broad visions, penetrating eyes, and power of endurance. Help us to work with renewed vigor for a warless world, for a better distribution of wealth, and for a brotherhood that transcends race or color. In the name of the Spirit of Jesus we pray. Amen.
And why Thank you, Tim. That was absolutely beautiful. Good chilly morning. Thank you all for being here. Young man walked into my office this morning, and this is absolutely a true story. If he wants to raise his hand, he's more than happy to do so. Young man walked into my office, and he said, quote, "Pastor Blake is a great man," unquote. And indeed he is. Reverend Blake has been the pastor of the Mount Canaan Baptist Church since 1966. That's 51 years. 51 years. That is amazing. Absolutely amazing. He is a pillar of our community. In fact, he is a pillar of our state. In 2010, the Louisiana Democratic Party bestowed upon Reverend Blake a Lifetime Achievement Award. He has given himself to the betterment of his community, his city, and his state. And he has touched lives in many, many ways. And I'm just going to point out one single way of the many that are in your program, but one of the ways that he has touched and continues to touch lives is that he led the creation of the model prayer service at the Mount Canaan Baptist Church. And that prayer service has been emulated throughout our nation, all across the land. Again, absolutely amazing. Reverend Blake is married to the former Norma Jean Jernigan. He is a father of 4, a grandfather of 16, and a great-grandfather to 1. Absolutely amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, the Reverend Dr. Harry Blake.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much. Were I in a Black Baptist setting, I would have to say giving honor to God and to the president and and the whole 9 yards. So I will not do that. Let me thank you for that wonderful introduction. I don't know about white Methodists, but white Baptists take pride in having many people at prayer meeting, and that is something that Black Baptists normally could not say. But even last night in the snow, we had 100 people in prayer meeting. I'm so delighted to have, we have 4 children. I'm so delighted to have one of our children with us today, and that's Monica. Monica, will you please stand? Yes. Monica runs my life. She does. For some reason, I have no earthly explanation for it. I don't like doing these kinds of activities. I say no when she tells me. I think we've turned down several already. Brother Kalen got on the good side of Monica and paid her some money. And she etched me in for today. I'm keenly aware that Centenary is the oldest college west of the Mississippi, I believe, and the oldest in this city. I have a cousin who graduated from this school, and she's now a practicing physician. So I do have some connection with this school. As a matter of fact, when we got married 60 years ago, I suggested to my wife that she come to Centenary. And at that time, the way I had been treated in this city, she wasn't sure how she would be treated here and declined. I'm going to tell her she needs to come to Centenary. Tim, thank you. Gosh, boy, you can sing. Bless you. One last thing, and then I'll get to what my assignment. It's always a joy for me to look in the audience and see members of Mount Canaan. And let me ask Mount Canaan members to stand, please. And to have my city councilman here today, Mr. Bradford, and there may be other elected officials. If so, Brother Bradford, will you stand, and other elected officials who represent me, please stand with me. I've already told you that I've been married 60 years come August of this year. And when Norma and I celebrated our 50th anniversary, she said to Mount Canaan these words I shall never forget. I have been a married widow for 50 years. Serious indictment. She's absent today because she's expecting to get well from the flu. Now, had I said that in the black community, they would have gotten it. Y'all slow. (1934), October 21st, I was born in Arkansas on a plantation. I have lived on 3 plantations. The Leland Plantation in Lake Village, Arkansas, the Ashley Plantation in Tallulah, Madison Parish, and the Woodspur Plantation 15 miles north of Shreveport near Dixie, Louisiana. I was born to parents. My daddy never learned to read nor write. And when I get to heaven, I'm going to have to apologize to him that I didn't take the time to teach him to write his name. My daddy was a sharecropper. Unlike the Bradfords, Bradford, I think, lived on in the country on a farm. His daddy owned the land. My daddy was a sharecropper, a tenant farmer. And I was doing some research that when slavery was abolished, white America didn't quite know what to do with blacks. And they labeled them as freedmen, but they needed work. And please forgive me, but as I see it, slavery was continued under another name. That's right. Sharecropping. So really, as I look at my life and my history, I'm a part of slavery under another name. I lived on the plantation until 1959, 24 years old. I guess I would still be on the plantation if my wife had not asked me to marry her. And she freed me from the plantation. That's my story. I did live on the plantation until I was 24 years old. Or slave under a new name, a different name. But even on the plantation, I saw things happening in America that did not make sense to me. I was sold a bill of goods that the white man's ice was colder, his sugar was sweeter. And one day I tasted a white man's sugar. It tasted just like my daddy's sugar. So then I thought, something is wrong with America. Why is it that I have to drink from a fountain designated for coloreds only? Why is it that I have to buy a ticket on a bus, and go to the back when there's plenty of sitting room up front? What's wrong with me? What is it about me that I have to be castigated and told to sit in the rear when there's sitting room up front? Or stand, we didn't have McDonald's in that day, but stand like today on the outside of a window of a hamburger joint. Order a hamburger when others are sitting on the inside, and it's handed to me by a waitress who didn't want to be bothered with me. I saw this, and I knew something was wrong with this, and I decided that I will do what I can to bring about a change. On this plantation, let me go back to the plantation. I happened to be living, my daddy, I guess, always chose a decent plantation owner. The plantation where I grew up on, the owner built a Baptist church and a Methodist church, Black Baptist building, and Black Baptist and Black Methodist. And he put the public school in the Black Baptist church. He selected that. I guess I'll have to do some research. I don't know how that was connected with the school system. The plantation owner selected the person who would be the teacher. My teacher was not really a college graduate. And she taught first grade through 7th grade, every subject. And I was promoted to the 8th grade, left the plantation school, and I was 8th grade before I had ever heard of the 8 parts of speech. Really didn't know what a fraction was, except there was a number written over the top of a number. In my second year after I left that school, I moved to Caddo Parish, 9th grade, thrown into the famous Booker Washington High School. And now I've got to compete with students who've been properly educated, or at least better educated than me. And I literally sat up many times all night long trying to understand algebra, trying to conjugate sentences. And I was determined to learn decent grammar because I saw white folk laughing at black folk because they didn't get the verbs right. And even though I learned to speak decent grammar, I was still treated like a second-class citizen. Well, I made it through Booker Washington. How I made it, I have no earthly explanation, and became the president of the largest graduating class in the history of Booker Washington. My counselor said to me, Harry, where are you going to school? Just before I graduated, I said, well, I'd like to go to Morehouse, but I was not prepared to go to any house. And she said to me, my grandfather, who lives in Marshall, Texas, and she added, the school that I graduated from, Bishop College, is in Marshall, Texas at that time. He keeps students in his home. I want you to go and meet him. And I did. He said, I'd be happy to have you come. And then I proceeded to meet the president of that college and said to him, sir, I have no money, but I know how to work. And his response was, since you know how to work, I'll see you in September and I'll have a job for you. And he assigned me to the first lady of the college, his wife, to drive her and to work in the student center. And I put so many work hours in school that when I graduated, the school owed me money that they never paid me. And this is the truth. I don't know how I got in school because I couldn't have passed the college entrance test. But God gave me two teachers I remember. I fondly remember. When I made a D on the test, both of those teachers would put D/C-, and the C got on my transcript. And when I got to thinking about it, when I became 50 years old, God said to me, those were grace grades. And now here I stand in Centenary College to tell my story. Upon graduating in 1959 from college, Martin King was my commencement speaker. I had read his book, Stride Towards Freedom, which chronicled the bus boycott movement in Birmingham, Alabama, in Montgomery, Alabama. Plus, I was familiar with the late Dr. T.J. Jemison, pastor of Mount Zion First Baptist, Baton Rouge, had already successfully done a bus boycott in Baton Rouge, in my state. I later learned that Dr. King came to Dr. Jemison and modeled the Montgomery bus boycott by what had been done in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Dr. C.O. Simpkins, who incidentally, the SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Dr. King's organization, was organized in Louisiana, New Zion Baptist Church, New Orleans. Dr. Simpkins was on his board and in 1959 and said to Dr. King, there's a young man in my city. I want you to hire him as a field director and assign him specifically to Shreveport to help blacks become registered voters and to teach them to pass the test and what was required to become registered voters. On March 1st, I was interviewed and became the first field director of SCLC, assigned to Shreveport. Went to work March 1st. March 2nd, I was arrested. Harry Blake arrested. My daddy could not read or write. He never had an arrest record. How am I going to handle this? Now I got an arrest record. And let me tell you how that came about. The city fathers of Shreveport knew that I had been hired by Dr. King, wanted to talk with me rather than making an appointment. They arrested me. And the chief of police said to me, Reverend Blake, you have a bright future in Shreveport, and you should not be bothered, be connected with that communist king. And if you tell me that you are going to resign and not work with him, I'll release you. If not, I'm going to arrest you. And I reached my hands out for him to put cuffs on them because I decided I would not let someone dictate my morals or my values. I didn't think it was famous. I didn't keep records of how many times I was arrested in Shreveport. I'll give you two accounts. One time, I think it was the last time Dr. King spoke in Shreveport, his executive director, Dr. Wyatt T. Walker, was here. And the Ku Klux Klan were picketing Dr. King's speech at Little Union Church. And Dr. Walker and I went out to see what was going on, and policemen said, hey boys, y'all go back in the church. And of course, Dr. Walker, being a Yankee, didn't respond to that well. Your boys, with me being a Southerner, I thought I would go. He said, Harry, we have the freedom to be out here. And we were told twice to go in church, and we did not, and we were arrested. Kept in jail for 3 days under mental observation. And of course, my wife said, I have not been cleared of that charge yet. To make a long story short, fast forward, when the girls in Birmingham, Alabama were killed, President Kennedy announced that the subsequent Sunday would be a Sunday, a day of mourning, and encouraged blacks all over America to have memorial services. I went to Commissioner Joyce Dortois to get a permit to march. We would march from Booker, Washington to Little Union Church, just about 3 blocks apart. I solicited the permit on Monday. I was called Saturday noon to say that the permit to march is denied. The commissioner said to me, now what are you going to do? I said, well, Commissioner, you had 5 days to make your decision, and you're only giving me 5 seconds. I'll let you know later. He said, well, I'll tell you this. If anybody marches in that march on Sunday, they will be arrested. And of course, Commissioner George Dortois was a man of his word. And may I add parenthetically, the white community really did not appreciate or did not understand his action toward the blacks until he came to your campus. And I don't remember what dorm it was in, and beat up some of your white students. And then the white community took notice that George Dortois may be what the blacks say he is. Back to my story. I did not want, and I knew he would do it, I didn't want unsuspecting people, blacks, to get arrested and lose their jobs. Because Mr. Dortois had a way of trying to keep the black community under his control. He would put a person in our rallies and in our private meetings with the surveillance, and they would record the meetings, and he would have them transcribed. And if anyone was in that meeting who worked for a company in this city, didn't have a lot of companies, it was reported to the president of that company, this black man who works for you was at this rally, civil rights rally, fire him. And even the superintendent of schools monitored school teachers. And I went through a period, and I understood it quite well, that it was dangerous to be seen with me. And if blacks saw me coming on one side of the street, they would get on the other side. I understood that. I understood that quite well. Well, I wanted to inform the committee or the public that we will not have the rally. We're not going to have the march. We'll just assemble it at New Orleans, at New Union Church. And before Mr. George Dortois found out this was Saturday, the next day Sunday, he had garnered law enforcement people all over this parish, all over the city, and Little Union, Milam Street looked like a war zone. At the end of the service, we wondered how would we get out, because they have mounted policemen with bayonets, with cow prods. And the late attorney Jesse Stone went and negotiated with Mr. Dortois to let us come out 2 by 2s. I was on the phone trying to get the Justice Department to let them know what was going on with others. And I happened to walk to the vestibule of the church. Mr. Dortois, with 2 other policemen, were in the vestibule of the church, came and manhandled me and began to beat me, drug me outside of the church, and every policeman who could get a piece of my head with his nightstick beat me until they thought I was dead or appeared to be lifeless, and left me lay on the ground in front of the church, September 22nd, 1960, what was it? 63, thank you. That's my Shreveport story. I'll close by saying this. Before I signed on to work with Martin King, I went to my dad, my parents, and said to them what my decision was. And I informed my daddy that I may get killed, but you may get killed or injured also because I'm your son. And I want to apologize to you for making this decision that may bring harm to you. And my daddy, who could not read or write, a tenant farmer, said to me, I would be disappointed if you made any other decision. And he literally went through hell. My siblings, who are much younger than I, remind me that everywhere my daddy went, he was stopped by policemen and cursed out, never beaten, but cursed out, intimidated. But my daddy had no education, but was a man of integrity and a man of courage, and whatever I am, it's because of what he bequeathed to me. That's my story. You've heard enough. Bless you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure today to introduce the members of the Diversity Committee who helped put this together today. If you would please stand when I call your name. Our chair is Don Hooper, Dr. Andia Augustin-Billy, Dr. Chandra Pokral, in the back, Dr. Sam Shepard, and Dr. Ross Smith. Our staff members are Chris Brown, Montgomery Mewers, Monica Powell, Deborah Scarlatta, Chief Eddie Walker, Kaylin Walker, and myself. Our students are Taha Hyatt, Halen Sumner, and Hunter Todd. Thank y'all. I would also like to mention that we do have some continuing examples of things that we're going to be doing this week. Tomorrow there will be a stage performance at 7:30. The Mahogany Theater's The Montgomery Bus Boycott will be in the Anderson Auditorium. For students, you will be awarded 50 passport points. This is free for Centenary students, faculty, and staff, and the general public it's $5, and the doors open at 7 p.m. On Saturday, there will be the annual oratorial contest. It will be at 1 p.m. It's the 7th annual Martin Luther King Oratory Competition and Youth Leadership Award Program. This location has been changed to room in the Mickle 114 of the Carlisle Auditorium. It was scheduled for the Anderson Auditorium. Again, 50 passport points will be awarded for that. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to President Holoman.
Thank you, Edie, and thanks to all the members of the Diversity Committee who made this happen. Welcome once again, Reverend Blake. We are honored by your presence, and we are moved by your story. Welcome the other members of his faith community and all the faith communities that make such a rich tapestry of Christianity and Judaism and Muslim and Hindu that make up Shreveport and all the other faiths. We take that diversity seriously. We love it. We celebrate it. Thank you for being here today. In the last 10 days, I've had two experiences that I have been reflecting on at great length this week. The first was I was part of a meeting of 14 of the 16 presidents of the Associated Colleges of the South, the great liberal arts colleges that stretch from Richmond, Virginia to San Antonio, Texas, and include schools like Centenary. We're not quite the oldest. Washington and Lee is the oldest in that group. And as presidents, we had a very enlightening, troubling, meaningful conversation about what does it mean to do liberal arts education in the South? How do we who lead institutions that have histories that stretch back into slavery of both the old face and the new face, how do we address that concern? How do we acknowledge? And each of the schools have different records, and yet we all are complicit in that crime to a greater or lesser extent. How do we address that and yet also acknowledge that we are moving forward and we want to right that wrong, I should say. And then, as some of you heard me say on Monday, last Saturday, I was standing on the streets of Memphis, looking up at the balcony of the Lorraine Motel. And then I entered into the National Civil Rights Museum that has been constructed at that hotel. And my wife drew my attention to a map. It's such a rich museum, you can't possibly take it in all at once. And she actually saw this before I did. It was a map. And on that map, Caddo Parish was prominently featured. What did that map represent? Lynchings. This is our heritage, friends. I have said, and it's part of our new strategic plan, that Centenary will be Shreveport-Bossier's College. But that means we need to face that history. We need to be part of the solution. We need to keep talking about the problem. We'll be hosting a reconciliation dinner and a conversation, but that's just part of what needs to go on. This reconciliation, this healing, in South Africa, they had truth and reconciliation panels to talk about what had gone on under apartheid. Centenary will be part of that. A similar conversation. I'm glad you all are here. I don't know, I'm not smart enough to know all of the solutions. I know the magnitude of the fight that is still to come. To close, I was trying to, find a nice quote from Dr. King or an aphorism, and then I thought, well, Dr. King drew great strength from one of my role models, Mohandas Gandhi. So I was looking at quotes from Gandhi, and there's so many quotes that he clearly didn't say. They have been misattributed. So I decided I'd go back to an older source. Two quotes that I think about all the time. For what does the Lord require of you but to do justice? Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an everlasting stream. We will do that at Centenary. Thank you for being here.